This little pig went to market where they buy and sell the stocks. This little pig came home again with a system full of shocks.
Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I am Ryan, and today I'll be talking about 1929 by Andrew Ross Sorkin. This is inside the greatest crash in Wall Street history and how it shattered a nation. I got this book at an event at Politics and Prose. Boom, there's the hat again. With Andrew Ross Sorkin, and it's signed. Now, there was a little bit of angst on my part about the signature. I don't know. Is that really a signature? If he's signing a check, is that a signature? Seems a little rushed, maybe. The other thing is, it was pre-signed, and that annoyed me at the beginning of this event, because I think if you're going to be running around promoting your book and people are traveling to see you speak about your book, there should be a period of time where you can meet people inside their books. And to have a pre-signed book just seems like a cop-out to me. I had already bought 1929 and brought it with me, and when I found out that there were pre-signed ones and he wasn't going to stay for signatures, I bought a signed copy and then returned my unsigned copy. He ended up being available a little bit after, so he signed my copy of Too Big to Fail, and I appreciate that. And he was nice. He was very nice. He was almost like double booked. It felt like he had somewhere he had to go. He had to go to the airport, and I would just recommend, if you're an author, give yourself the time between. You should not be cutting anything short to go do something else, because this is what you're traveling for. This is kind of the job in the moment. So that was my only, I'll call it misgiving. It was something that I was not thrilled about, but it ended up being a really fun event. He did a great job speaking, really great questions, lots of back and forth with folks. I really liked that. And he did take time to take pictures before he left. He was rushed, but he took pictures. Very nice about that. Signed my copy of Too Big to Fail. I already had this one signed since it was pre-signed. So I like that. And I was already reading King Sorrow, which I've done a review for. But this was on my list. And this is a thick book, but it's not extremely long. King Sorrow was 860 pages or something like that. And this one looked about the same thickness, but the pages must be thicker because there's only 400. Let's see here. There are only, if you take out the endnotes, about 450. Yeah, 456 pages. So not overly long. And really interesting. Really interesting. This is an area that I like. I've read a lot about 1929, the stock market crash in 1929, the resulting Great Depression, what came out of that era, what led up to it. So I was really interested to see how he took it. Andrew Ross Sorkin worked on this book for 8 years, and this is the culmination of that 8 years of work. And what he talked about in the event, and also talks about at the end of this book, is what started this. He was at an event at Yale, and he got there early, and he went to, I think it was Yale. He went to the library, and he found some correspondence, and it was really interesting, the back and forth. So he thought, what if I were able to approach 1929, the events around 1929, with the same kind of personal touch that you kind of got with Too Big to Fail? The human story behind it, not just the numbers, the ups and the downs, and people jumping from windows, but really kind of following individuals. And that's not easy, I'm sure, because sometimes you'll find individuals you think are going to be good and they drop off. But he did it. And this book follows a smaller group than a lot of books you'll read. Thomas Lamont, who was a partner at J.P. Morgan when it was a partnership. A little bit Jack Morgan, the son of J.P. Morgan. We got Charlie Mitchell, who was the head of National City Bank, which eventually became Citibank, changed the spelling, and Citigroup, which still exists today. We also have Chase, which is now part of JP Morgan Chase. We get some of the players in the government. Carter Glass from Virginia, where I live. Of course, the presidents, Herbert Hoover, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and then a lot of other players in it. Jesse Livermore, short seller, some of their relationships. What's interesting is you do get to see that there's kind of the way it's set up is just dates. He gives you, each chapter is a date, and at some point you're kind of moving towards the crash and then out of the crash. I mean, there's a lot of other names that are brought up in here. There is, at the front of this book, there are a list of people that are going to be talked about, which is really, really interesting. Richard Whitney, of course, the president of eventually president of the New York Stock Exchange. Michael Meehan, who was a pool operator and got in trouble. Bernard Baruch, Charles Merrill Lynch. It's kind of a who's who of this time period. Not surprising. So you get to kind of see what they're doing in the lead up to the crash. It's interesting because you do have a decade of kind of the roaring 20s where everyone thinks it's only going up. And for a long time, the stock market was considered a speculative venture. It was really for the folks that had the money. And for a lot of the folks that had the money, they also had access to information or pool operations where they would kind of pass around stocks to bump up, almost like a pump and dump, bump up the stocks. And then as other people got into it thinking there was a lot of activity, they would quietly back out. And then the price would, the force pushing up the price of the stock would drop out from underneath it and people would lose everything. But at some point in the 1920s, going into the 1920s, your everyday citizen really got into it and were playing the markets. And as the markets were going up, people kind of thought, hey, this is my chance. This is I'm going to make some good money off this. And they were borrowing to invest. There was a lot more borrowing, a lot more doing things on margin. And so they would, let's say they're going to invest $100. They would only invest $20, borrow $80, which was doable when the market was going up. But as soon as the bottom came out and it dropped, all of a sudden you had all of this debt that you didn't have. You had paper profits. You didn't have money to back that up unless you were taking money out of the market. And people weren't doing that a lot of times. So you had these companies that had extended those loans, and they started having to cover that. And they were like, hey, you need to give us more money to cover the debt portion of your investment. And it became kind of a race to the bottom as people were starting to unload shares just to get that money to cover their margin calls. And it blew up. People lost everything. Now, the people that had everything beforehand, the high-end kind of robber baron class, they didn't lose everything. They lost a lot. You also had some people like Jesse Livermore who shorted at the right time, made a lot of money, eventually lost it, had to go back in and bet again, and eventually it worked against him, and eventually he killed himself. But you also had kind of one of the sayings is, this is going to butcher the saying, but basically the tide has to go out for you to know who's naked. Is that right? Kind of like that. Once the market turned, not only were people losing a lot or everything, you also started figuring out that there were a number of frauds, and some of that's in here too. The unique thing about 1929, the book, is that Andrew Ross Sorkin really follows these individuals through the ups and the downs, and he has access to some of the correspondence, which really lets you know not only what they were doing in public, which is generally public knowledge, but also what was being said in the background and how maybe what they were saying behind the scenes didn't always jive with what they were saying publicly. because there was some posturing at this point too. There are a lot of laws that didn't exist. This is 1929, so this is before FDIC, the SEC existed. The Federal Reserve was around, but not very long. It had really come out of the 1907 crash and the resulting Federal Reserve Act. But there are a lot of laws there are a lot of things that happen in this that you would think that should be illegal, but at this point, maybe it wasn't. It eventually may become illegal as other acts were created and laws were written. You also get to see some of the hearings, some of the process in Congress to get important laws passed that were answers to what happened in 1929. The Pecora hearings, which really exposed a lot of what was going on, not necessarily everything that contributed to the crash, but things that really important or prominent banks were doing that the everyday person didn't really know about. And this is a time period where white collar crime was not really considered a thing. It came out of this that it was, and I've done a review, or I did a kind of a highlight of a book called White Collar Crime, which you can see. But at this point, it was really kind of, these are the guys, these are the upper echelon, and they can do no wrong. But as these hearings exposed the pool operations, the insider trading, some of the stocks that were offered much lower than what they were going for on the market, on the open market, and kind of the buddy system and favors that were passed around, those kinds of things would change. So I really enjoyed it. It was not a super long read. It's 456 pages. Really interesting stuff. It really also covered a pretty tight period. Andrew Ross Sorkin didn't go into all of the post-crash stuff. You had like the crash in 1929, in October 1929. But then you also had the bottom falling out of the markets for weeks and months after that. And really, one of the big things is the freezing of credit, that banks and institutions were so afraid of what was happening that they weren't lending. And because they weren't lending, other institutions also couldn't spend and couldn't lend and couldn't buy stuff. And it just all froze up. And he talks about that. So, you know, there's always this kind of discussion. Are the markets the economy? No. Are the markets reflecting the economy? If something happens, does it go from the general economy to the markets showing a symptom of what's happening in the economy, or is it the other way around? And he kind of covers that in here. Now, at the talk that he gave, he talked about what's going on today, and I thought that maybe this book was going to have some chapters that compare what happened in 1929 to what we see in 2025. That wasn't the case in this book, but here's just a little shot of what he was talking about when I was there.
The Genius Act effectively is going to allow private equity, venture capital, crypto, private credit. All of this is now going to be available for retail traders to invest in without the same disclosures that have historically been involved with publicly traded companies. You're going to be seeing a whole bevy of new instruments that the public is going to have access to. It'll be available in your 401ks, so it's going to be in retirement plans. They do not have the same kinds of disclosures. Those kinds of disclosures, by the way, I would say disclosure was a huge issue also in 1929. There was no insider trading laws. The SEC didn't exist until 1934. There was no bank capital. There was nothing. By the way, people would say to me, when you were doing research, did you ever look at a prospectus for any of these companies? And I would look at them like, prospectus? There was no prospectus. You'd be lucky if there was a leaflet for these companies. So there was no...
And I'll include a link to his entire stream from Politics and Prose down in the description area. But I like this book so much, and it really kind of hits home a lot of the interest that I have in this 1920s, 1930s period, and the resulting the response from the government, from the population, from other institutions, and this is a moment in time, but there was so much stuff that happened after 1929 and even the early 30s, especially with the transition from Herbert Hoover administration to the FDR administration. And we don't get too far into that, just the initial stuff. And then there is a little bit at the end of this book that follows some of the players that he's really highlighting in this book through the end of their lives, but not in depth. It's just kind of like, where are they now? And now being like the 50s, 60s, 70s, before they died. So 1929, 5 stars, highly recommend it. Andrew Ross Sorkin did a great job with this. It's great. So check it out. Not too long of a read, but an interesting moment in history, and that inside look, that kind of personal approach. Thanks for being here today. I will talk to you later. Have a good one.
I don't understand their language, don't know what it's all about. For a bull buys up and the bear sells down and the broker sells you out. And here is a song they sing the whole day long. Oh, the market's not so good today, your stocks look kinda sick. In fact, they all drop down a point each time the tickers tick. We'll have to have more margin now, there isn't any doubt. So you better dash with a load of cash or we'll have to sell you out. The stock exchange is a funny place, it's the strangest place in town. The seats cost $500,000 cash, but the brokers won't sit down. There's the broker, the bull and the bear. It's queer but it's not a joke, for you get the bull till your bankrolls bare and the broker says you're broke. And here is the song I hear the whole day long. Oh, the market's not so good today, your stocks look kinda sick. In fact, they all drop down a point each time the tickers tick. We'll have to have more margin now, there isn't any doubt. So you better dash with a load of cash or we'll have to sell you out. The market simply goes to prove that we still have loco weeds. For the bull buys what he doesn't want and the bear sells what he needs. I bought an elevator stock and thought that I'd done well. Then the little bears all ran downstairs and rang the basement bell. And here is the song I heard the whole day long. Oh, the market's not so good today, your stocks look kinda sick. In fact, they all drop down a point each time the tickers tick. We'll have to have more margin now, there isn't any doubt. So you better dash with a load of